In 1992, in the city of Porvoo, Finland, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who, as you know, is the head of the Church of England and of the worldwide Anglican Communion, signed an agreement with the archbishops of 8 other nations around the Baltic and North Seas. It included the Anglican Church in Ireland, as well as the state Lutheran churches of Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Estonia, and Lithuania. Basically, this ecumenical agreement recognized each other as national expressions of the same church on different soils. In other words, a member of the Anglican Church in London who moved to the Swedish capital of Stockholm would automatically be considered a member of the Church of Sweden as long as he or she resided in that country. And likewise, any Scandinavian or Baltic Lutherans who moved to Great Britain or Ireland would automatically be considered members of the Church of England or the Church of Ireland as long as they lived in those countries. Now, I mention this because it's an example of how the theological understanding of Anglicans and Lutherans is so consistent that we are virtually one and the same. However, you may have noticed that some of our practices are slightly different. Just enough to throw me off as I transition from the Lutheran service to the Episcopal. We Lutherans, for example, have adopted the Swedish practice of using the color blue as the liturgical color for Advent, whereas the Episcopal Church continues to use the color purple during Advent, which is actually the color that we used when I was growing up. We had those 3 purple candles on the Advent wreath with that 1 pink candle for Jubilate Sunday, the day of rejoicing on the 3rd Sunday of Advent. So why did the Swedish church influence a change to blue? Advent had long been thought of as a penitential season like Lent, and therefore purple is the appropriate penitential color. Lent is the season of preparation for the festival of Easter, and in the old days, Advent was also a somber time of reflection before the 12 feast days of Christmas that begin on the evening of December 24th. And of course, trees would only appear and be decorated on Christmas Eve for those 12 days of the feast to follow. But the world around us is in a different mood at this time of year. There is hardly time for us to sit around in somber reflection and ponder our relationship with God when our lives get so busy sending cards and buying and wrapping presents and decorating our homes and cooking and consuming all sorts of special edible treats. It's natural that we get caught up in the mood of the secular world around us rather than what the church calendar says. It's almost impossible to avoid it. A former parishioner of mine posted on Facebook a week ago, Saturday, that she had finally managed to get her tree up and decorated. Finally? I asked. And I pointed out that Advent was still a week away, much less Christmas. I know, Pastor Mark, she replied. It's just that I love the Christmas season so much that I cannot wait to get our decorations up. Our world is in such a hurry to embrace Christmas that by the time the actual 12 days of the Christmas feast arrive, we're already feasted out. We've already done all our parties and gift exchanges. The music that's been on the radio for the past 30 days suddenly gets dropped, and the card section has been restocked with Valentines. Why then should we drape our sanctuary in blue rather than in red and green like at the mall? Blue is the color of hope. When Abraham felt despair over the lack of having a legitimate heir, God called him to step outside of his tent and look up at the sky. And God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. And remember that Abraham was already an old man that did not even have a son yet. You see, God gives us hope even when the situation seems hopeless. Likewise, when Noah emerged from his ark and saw the devastation that the flood had caused all around him, God placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign of hope that even when all seems lost, God enables us to start anew. Therefore, blue, the color of the sky, is the color of hope. And hope is one of the operative words for Advent. The Hebrew prophet Jeremiah gives us a sign of hope in the symbol of a new young branch growing out of an old wizened stump. Now, Jeremiah was not known for being particularly optimistic. If you read the book that bears his name, it's full of foreboding, doom, and gloom. And yet here, a little more than halfway through the book, we have this powerful reminder of hope. This symbol is really potent for us in small parishes where we constantly worry about our survival. God took an old tree stump that looked as though it was good and dead, and suddenly there is this fresh new twig of growth. Because with God, all things are possible. You see, the role of the Hebrew prophets, like Jeremiah, was twofold. The first task they had was to warn God's people about the dire circumstances that they were in. But the second was to remind them that no matter what the circumstances, there is always hope. And the same is true of Jesus' prophecy of the end times in our gospel reading today. It is a connection with the theme of the end times that we heard last Sunday on Christ the King Sunday, the last Sunday of the church year. There is a seamless connection with this first Sunday of the new year. Just like the Advent wreath is a circle that has no end and no beginning. We think about Christ's return at the end of time to set things right the way that God intended them to be. At first, Jesus' prophecy in Luke seems as gloomy as anything that Jeremiah might have said. Did you pick that up when I read it for you a short time ago? Jesus predicted that there would be distress among nations, and that people would faint from fear and foreboding of what is coming upon the world. Doesn't that kind of sound like the nightly news these days? Full of distress, fear, foreboding. You cannot even trust a simple salad anymore, that the lettuce isn't out to kill you. What's up with that? But Jesus does not want us to tremble and quake. Rather, he tells us, stand up, raise up your heads. Why? Because your redemption is drawing near. In other words, be hopeful about the future because it is held securely in the hands of a most gracious and loving God. For the past year and a half that I've been serving here in Florence, I have received a very special blessing each Sunday morning. It's usually still dark out when I leave my house in Columbia, an hour and 15 minutes away, especially at this time of year. And as I drive eastward on I-20, daylight breaks over the horizon. And I am treated to the most beautiful dawn spectacles. Each Sunday is different, but all of them are inspiring. Even when the air is shrouded by fog, as it was this morning, the mist grows lighter and glows as the sun rises. So I tell you, by the time I get here, I am so pumped and primed for worship, because God has entertained and inspired me with this display of wonder that only God can create. And I'm tempted each Sunday morning to pull over to the side of the road and take a picture of that beautiful sky. But no photo could ever do it justice. And that eastern sky usually turns some indescribable shade of blue. For only God can fulfill us with the sure and certain hope that we are loved, no matter what our circumstances. Amen.